Yeah, it's like 50 degrees here, so I'm all bundled up in the garage.
I'm
I'm
envious.
I'm
We're rolling on, like, 12 up here, so
yeah, so I'm like, yeah, I can't complain. I
yeah.
shouldn't complain. I will complain, but I shouldn't.
Yeah,
But,
just don't do it here, man, you know?
oh, oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm kidding.
Hello, I'm Ken Kinsley, and this is Finding the Words, the only podcast devoted to text-based art and artists. What do Wilmington, North Carolina, skateboarding, a trip to New York City, Jackie O, back surgery, and ambiguous shapes have in common? Well, if you said Joseph O'Neill, then you are absolutely right. I sat down with Joseph, remotely of course, from Studio 1120 in Easton, Pennsylvania, a few days before Christmas. And besides the relative chilliness of our studios, we talked about his personal journey in becoming an artist, the importance of tapping into the unconscious, and the crucial role of items in the peripheral. Here's my chat with Joseph O'Neill. So, how did a kid from Wilmington, North Carolina become a art director for Saturday Skateboards at 21 and now have a studio in Pennsylvania for his painting? How'd you get started on all this?
Oh, man, there's a lotta gaps in there, a lot of space to fill in. Yeah, I mean, I got into skateboarding, I guess, when I was, around 12 or so, 11 or 12,
Mhm.
and, just surprisingly, there was a pretty healthy skateboard scene in the town I grew up in. Wilmington is a beach town, and skateboarding kind of sprung from that. And yeah, I was just super attracted to it. Just felt compelled to kind of go in that direction. And
Mhm.
through becoming a part of that scene, I ended up working at the skateboard shop, and just met a lot of people and traveled a good bit skateboarding and meeting people that way that are like-minded. And I kind of got hooked up with Saturday Skateboards, and they were a small company out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And in the early years, it's pretty much just an East Coast company. We grew to international a little later, but they were looking to kind of expand and pour a little money into the project. And yeah, just kind of
Mhm.
I'll talk them into to let me be the art director for it. I had no experience at the time. I'd been painting for, seriously for, maybe 2 or 3 years at that point, but, I didn't really know what I was doing, but had a, had opinions, I'd say, about how I thought things should look, and that
Mhm.
kind of, and, yeah, fortunately, they were like, let's do it. Let's give them the reins and see what we can do. So I had a good run with those guys for a few years up in Charlotte, and really grateful to everyone over there at the time. And they really kind of accommodated what how I saw things, and gave me a studio space to work. And that was kind of my first sort of legit studio outside of a bedroom kind of deal. So that felt good to have space to paint off hours and after work and things like that. Um, and then after a skateboard trip to New York, and kind of seeing, what was going on there in the contemporary conversation. And I mean, we had internet and everything back then, but it wasn't as connected.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was out of the loop until I went to New York, and was like, oh, like this is what's happening up here. And I didn't fully understand it on any sort of intellectual level at that time, but emotionally and viscerally, it just felt like a language I always understood. Not intellectually, but I just kind of felt that. I felt that pull that pulled me towards skateboarding as a kid. And so yeah, it was just I don't know, 4 or 5 months after that trip, I, packed up in Charlotte and came up to New York to, try and be a painter.
You said this is it. So what kind of stuff were you seeing in terms of the, as you put it, the contemporary conversation? What galleries or what artists were you getting exposed to?
Yeah, it was all that trip to New York was all kinda overwhelming. It was just kind of experiencing a lot of visuals and energy and
Hmm.
things that, again, I felt incredibly familiar, but I had never seen before.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it was all, you know, yeah, a little bit blurry that time period, but coming from skateboarding, yeah, my entry was kind of through that world, and so a lot of the artists from Juxtapose magazine, they're
Hmm.
involved in the skateboard stuff, so that was kind of my entry point, and that led me to like, oh well, who are they looking at? Who are they talking about? And they were talking about Warhol and
Hmm.
Basquiat, and so I got into that, like, oh, let's see what these guys are doing. And then from Basquiat, you say, oh, he's looking at Twombly. And then you see Twombly's looking at Monet and Turner. And so you're like, oh, well, what are these guys about? And so from there, you're
Hmm.
just kind of chasing pulling on the string. And, I was fascinated every time I took a tug on the string. So I just kind of never stopped pulling. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. What year was the trip to New York?
Oh, gosh, let's see. So that would have been just got me doing some math. Yeah, maybe like 2004, 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, around 2005, 2006. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, and then I had a studio in different places around Brooklyn for years, and met my now wife, who was living in New Jersey at the time, and then I spent a lot of time working out of a studio in Newark, New Jersey,
Hmm.
an artist as well, and we just wanted some concrete under our feet, as far as stability, and we had gotten married, and so we were looking for affordable real estate, and
Hmm.
that's what spurned us ending up here in Easton,
That,
Pennsylvania.
that that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now you're at 1120. That's the name of the studio there. Did you start that studio? Did you find how did that get going?
Yeah, no, just word of mouth. Yeah, no, I didn't start it. I
Oh,
just
okay.
rent space here.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Group of people who run it. Great group of artists who inhabit the space. So
Hmm.
just a couple blocks from my house, so I feel pretty fortunate with the setup.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like a very supportive situation there.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. It's great, man. It's a real good scene, and we've got over, I think, around 22, 23 artists working out of
Mm.
the building. And it's every array of disciplines, and kind of seriousness, and that kind of thing. So it's cool, man. It's good. It's a nice diverse network.
Mhm. And would you say that, people are more kinda pushing each other to, pushing each other forward or just more nurturing?
Yeah, I'd say it falls maybe a little more on the nurturing side.
Mhm.
There's there's a couple other artists here that I would say are somewhat part of, maybe broadly speaking, similar conversations as me, and we'll kind of dive in sometimes, and that's
Mhm.
nice to have that. Then I can always retreat to my little solitary studio for the real work.
You have the camaraderie if you want and or need, but you can go back in your cave, so to speak.
Definitely.
Nice.
So yeah.
So in terms of your work, I see some of it's there behind you. You've got a series with no text in it about Jackie
Yeah,
Onassis that you've been working on
appropriate.
for a number of years.
Yeah.
I think you started that back in like what, 2015?
Yeah, maybe 2008.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, somewhere around there, I started making the Onassis works.
Mhm,
Um, yeah, and that kind of runs, parallel to the text-based,
mhm,
non-objective work that I think most people relate
mhm,
to me, and yeah, just kind of a counterweight, if you will, to the
mhm.
madness of the other stuff.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you started doing that as kind of a form of meditation after, back surgery, am I right?
Yeah, that's when it really kind of became this repetitive, multiple type work. So I'd done quite a few Jackie Onassis paintings, and then when I went through a back surgery, uh, and consequently a long-term healing process that began in 2015. Yeah, I just kind of was drawn back to it, and made repetitive drawings, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds when I was laying in bed trying to recover from that. And yeah, something about the repetition was a meditation. So yeah.
Mhm. How's the back now?
Oh, it's pretty good,
Oh, good.
Yeah, not running and jumping and doing
Yeah.
doing crazy stuff, but as far as
Le-
painting and moving throughout the day, I'm all good. Thanks.
Less skateboarding now.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So why Jackie O?
So a couple things, and all of this is kind of just trying to intellectualize feelings after the fact. So I was just drawn to the imagery. There's instances of her in art history, and then there's instances of kind of the idea of replacing the traditional Madonna with a some sort of. And I've always been attracted to like dualities. And for me, she holds kind of this unique space in modern culture where she's very much a symbol of America, and but also carries this kind of sense of European bourgeoisie. And I think that's an interesting sort of duality there. And then and I didn't kind of realize this until years and years uh, after I'd been painting these. But as a child, my mother and my aunts and kind of all the women in my life that nurtured and cared for me, they fashioned themselves after her, the way they kind of carried themselves and dressed. And so there's maybe some nostalgia and comfort there that I'm trying to tap into.
Hmm. Yeah, kind of a subliminal bit of your own, upbringing and childhood, what have you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I had been putting the word Onassis in paintings before I did any portraits. And that's kind of followed the same line of thinking where I felt a connection to the word. It's charged. It has some weight behind it, both visually, phonetically, and
Mhm.
culturally. And so yes, and just yeah, the way it looked kind of scrawled across the canvas, I was really into. And so then that kind of spurred the portraits as well. So kind of just all these things lining up.
Mhm. Now you kind of started these sort of as a meditation, or I don't know if they started as a meditation, but they became kind of that during the back surgery. Do you still practice meditation outside of the Jackie O paintings?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit.
Mhm.
I think like a lot of us, I go through periods of getting in good, healthy rhythms, and
Mhm.
I'm meditating in the morning and that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I'm not in that period right now.
Yeah,
I need
yeah.
to dip back in. But yeah, yeah. I mean, all painting's a form of meditation for me in some ways. Even when it's frustrating, there's some sort of some sort of catharsis that's occurring.
Mhm. Yeah, I asked that because in your, non-objective works, it feels very meditative. There's the washes of color and the kind of amorphous shapes that sometimes sort of repeat themselves. And then you've got the words in there, and you've said that the words don't really have any intention in the work. They're kind of there as an anchor, and that the non-objective forms are like a kite. And you like the tension between the 2. How would you describe that tension?
Ambiguous, just kind of a vibration. And I kind of approach all the work as I have a feeling and I'm making the piece. And it's this idea of trying to charge the material with that feeling, or trying to get the feeling to match the frequency, or the material of the work to match the frequency of of this sort of visceral feeling. So it's like tuning a guitar.
Mhm.
You're trying to pluck the chord of the material to match, the chord within our, nervous system, so to speak. And so, it's like that with the words, the composition, the forms, and the color. Um, so it's kind of always this play of, trying to manipulate things to match this inner frequency of the moment,
Mhm.
and each piece kind of takes on its own, but there's an overarching kind of tone as well.
Are there any restrictions that you place upon yourself? 'Cause, like you say, there's no intention in a lot of do you put any restrictions or, like, self-imposed rules to facilitate a lack of intention?
Yeah, so, I come up with these little games,
Mhm.
sort of, the way I collect kind of words and use them like a palette. Sometimes I'll paint with my left hand, kind of look away when making marks. And then I'll play games where I'll say like, okay, I'm going to open this book to page 32, and I have to pick a word from this page or whatever, and kind of keep
Sure.
the randomness. But color selection, word selection, form, kind of all of it is rooted in this idea of matching the frequency.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
it's no different than like someone who's an artist who's working with collage or something. Like, how do why did you make the decision to use that cutout shape or this cutout shape or
Mhm.
whatever? And it's because you felt some sort of twinge, or whatever it is, viscerally, emotionally, you're pulled to use it. And so, yeah, so that's kind of the overriding thing there.
Mhm.
And color, all of it is tied to that. It's a pretty simple, sort of idea or way of working as far as
Mhm.
that's concerned.
And, they're very, as you said, ambiguous, kind of flowy a lot of times. But within that, there's a lot of very set elements, it feels like, especially color. Like,
Hmm.
you have some very definite colors that seem to have carried through. Is there a, like, a set, philosophy behind the colors? Is there a meaning behind color for you?
Yeah, I mean, just the same thing, just trying to match that
Mm,
that tuning fork. And I don't, I have kind of loose formulas in my head for most of the colors I use, but I don't have anything written down. Every time I mix that sort of light blue,
mhm,
I do it. I do it in the moment, and I think that's kind of interesting, to kind of see how over the years how the blues line up, and the different
mhm,
colors I use kind of gradually shift in and out of each other.
mhm. And then in terms of, like, set elements, like, you have various, not just one size of canvas, but there's some set sizes of canvas that you work with. There's kind of become a general layout in terms of stripes of color, either just along the top and bottom or around all the sides, then the shapes in the middle. Do these kind of strictures allow for more freedom in a certain way?
Yeah, so I don't really have any rules with the text work. A flat picture plane for the most part, and no objective forms, and that kind of thing. But as far as the shapes go, it's just, it's like the words as well. The shapes, they become a language, and some of these shapes become symbols over the years.
Mm,
The symbols represent, I don't know, maybe it's yeah, I don't know, but it becomes some sort of language within itself.
mhm,
And it's kind of this idea of honesty, and honesty creates space for tendency kind of becomes ritual. And so then you're inclined to repeat shapes, like through that.
mhm,
It's like when you're a kid, why do you doodle that same kind of thing over and over? There's something there. But then, balancing that with, with exploration, and kind, pushing the picture plane through, different tactics and things. So
Yeah, and with those shapes, it was a little bit like a Moreau, where he would have,
Mm.
that sort of unconscious, that end of surrealism, where that's just kind of what would pop up. Is there a bit of that to it, do you think?
Yeah, yeah, well, I love those Moreaus you're talking
Mhm,
about, and he's able to, create so much sort of emotion and vibrancy with so little,
mhm.
and that's definitely something I'm attracted to. So yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Are you ever conscious of moving in new directions? Like, looking back at some of your work here, I see a lot of the same shapes, but they've kind of come more into focus. Like they've got a little harder edges now than they did a few years ago, it seems like. Or do you start thinking, okay, now I need to do this, or is it just an incremental shift that you don't even notice?
It's not something I'm consciously thinking
Mhm,
about, but yeah, the work breathes. You know, if we're art replicates, it is it's a reflection, right?
mhm,
It's a reflection of our existence. It's a reflection of what we know and understand, and it's a reflection of what we don't know and don't understand. It's a microcosm of the universe, a microcosm of the human experience, and the universe breathes, we breathe, and so kind of this looseness that becomes a little tighter over the years and loosens back up. It's a breath.
mhm,
At least that's how I see it. We'll see. I think I think it'll probably start to loosen up over the next few years, and then
mhm,
contract again, and the breaths continue. Hopefully.
mhm. There's a you have a lot of inspirations. I heard you talking at one point about Diane de Prima, the poet. And poetry play a large part in your work?
Yeah, definitely. I latch onto it. I think as a way to kind of examine my own choices and existence without having to look in my own mirror.
Mhm,
And I think that's why I reference a lot of poets and writers in my work, and that's kind of a form of self reflection.
mhm,
It's a way of talking about painting without talking about painting.
mhm. So what's coming up on the horizon for you in 2025?
Yeah, keep making work. I've got a doing a solo show with the Center for Visual Research at Cedar Crest College that I'm pretty excited about. Beautiful, beautiful gallery space, and run by the artist Brian Wiggins, who big fan of his work, and big fan of him as a person. So yeah, really looking forward to playing with that space.
Mhm.
And then, some other group shows, be doing some stuff with Gallery Rumpone in Germany. And yeah, we'll see what else.
Very cool. Now, I know you were, and that's how I became aware of you when I interviewed Chad Edding. He was saying,
Oh,
"Hey,
right, right.
you should check out Joseph O'Neill because I'm doing this show that he's curating. Are you going to do any plans for more curation?"
Yeah, loosely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that practice show,
yeah.
and it was great having Chad in the mix. He's such a impactful painter of the now. A way of kind of distilling the current into material that he does is really fantastic. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed curating, and I have some loose plans to do more, whether that's in 2025 and 2026. I don't know, but hey, man, hats off to all the gallerists and curators out there, because that's a that's a time consuming
Mhm,
venture.
mhm. Does that change the way you view your own painting in terms of, curating something like that or putting on a show?
I think it reinforced a lot of ideas. I started curating that show. I had a solo show, Scattered Poems, with Gallery Rampone, the end of last year, and it's kind of always tough for me emotionally after
Mhm,
solo shows. You're pulling on this sort of, you grab hold of this kind of a emotional cord, and you hold on to it and pull for months, year, and you're giving everything you have to something, and then the show opens, and there's this sort of like vacancy the
mhm.
next day. So in an attempt to not self spiral, I picked up the Praxis project, and it was a beautiful parachute, for me, and being able to kind of dive in and talk with the artist involved about what we're doing, why we get up and come to the studio every day. It was like, yeah, it was incredibly nourishing. So
Hmm.
in that way, it was very, very fruitful. As far as the way I'm looking at my work, um, I don't think that really changed, but just kind of reinforced the idea of like, all right, there's meaning to what we do. There's some sort of significance. Yeah.
And it seems like you're pretty prolific. You like to work on a lot of stuff at the same time. How many pieces will you have going in one at any given time?
Oh, I mean, it varies.
Yeah.
At least 4 or 5 at a time.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of this idea of, you know, the best way for me to finish a piece is to work on a different piece. It's like people you don't see like spirits and ghosts and stuff straight on. They're always in the peripheral. I'm not claiming to see ghosts or anything, just making a metaphor here. But
Sure.
you see phenomena occurs in the peripheral,
Hmm.
and so there's I've found that if I'm working on one piece and I go to drop the brush in the water or go to retrieve a different color from the palette or whatever, I'll see a different piece out of the corner of my eyes and have a kind of have a flash of the next move for that piece.
Hmm.
So it's kind of just this dance, and I don't like waiting around for things to dry to make the next move. So
Yeah.
kind of always having a piece to apply paint to is nice to keep the flow going.
Do you listen to music while you're working, or does that kind of seep into the paintings at all?
Yeah, I listen to a lot of music.
Hmm.
I listen to podcast and sometimes the news, but yeah, I usually have something going.
Hmm. Do you do sketches ahead of time, or
No,
yeah?
yeah, no. So it's all kind of and that's another way of so I clean my brushes on canvas that I haven't
Hmm.
started painting on, and
Oh.
then, and I'm just not paying attention. I'm just kinda wiping off the pigment, before I put it in the water, or, wiping the pigment from after I take it out of the water if there's still a little more pigment on it, and so that's how the paintings start, and then I look at it'll just be kind of a wily abstraction, and I look at it and I start to pick shapes from that.
Hmm.
And then I start to define those shapes, and that's how it begins.
So it's
Um,
kind of a great big cycle of the new painting starts from cleaning up from the old painting.
Yep, yep, or whatever current thing I'm working on,
Hmm.
and then the material already starts to inherit some sort of energy through that
Hmm.
process, and then
Hmm.
it's picking up on that energy and responding to it. Yeah, it's because for me, it's always a response, and so I learned kind of early on if I just have marks on something, then now I have something to respond to.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, right on, Ken. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's
Thank-
nice talking to you.
And that does it for this episode. Thank you all for listening, and a big thank you to Joseph O'Neill for coming in today. As always, check out his work in the show notes. There will be a link, and I would really appreciate it if you would follow or subscribe on whatever broadcasting service you subscribe to. Thank you once again, and I'll see you next time.